Hello, class, and welcome to my home. Decided to go ahead and post the first YouTube lecture. A couple of quick nuts and bolts. One, the reason I'm posting on YouTube rather than using a live streaming medium is because this way, since I'm not writing things on the board and you're not slowing me down with questions and things, the videos end up being pretty short, and so that's deliberate because since it's a pre-recorded video, you could watch it and you could rewatch it and rewind certain parts, etc. The second thing, though, I don't intend to lose the in-class kind of engagement with these things, but instead we are moving them to the online discussion forum. So there's a discussion forum per topic, roughly speaking. So please post any comments or applications, examples, and most importantly, questions onto those discussion boards. Um, in addition to enhancing your learning, those should also be counting towards your participation during the hiatus. So having said that, we're going to cover Bernard Williams' article Against Utilitarianism. It should go pretty quickly because I primarily just intend to hit the three main objections that are given on the review sheet. So Williams identifies three important objections. I'm going to take them in reverse order due to connections with Singer, as we will see. But first of all, then, if we're going backwards, there's this worry by Williams that utilitarianism loses integrity. So what does that mean? If you want to give it a precise definition, which you probably should, the worry is that any moral precept you have, such as murder is wrong, any moral precept could theoretically be overridden due to considerations of utility. So why is a utilitarian committed to this? Well, just think of an example. Well, it is part of my integrity that I don't cheat or I don't plagiarize, etc. But now imagine a situation where some maniac says, well, plagiarize your next assignment or I'm going to blow up an elementary school. Well, of course I'm going to cheat at that point. Now, that's an extreme example, but it gets to the worry about lack of integrity. Now, first of all, as stated, the Williams' worry of lack of integrity seems to only apply to act utilitarians rather than rule. It might be a good mental exercise to see if you can figure out why, but roughly speaking, it goes on a case-by-case basis. Second of all, as stated, there's a very obvious utilitarian reply to this objection, which is, well, wait a minute. There is exactly one moral principle that I'm not willing to sacrifice, and that is the utility principle. And so you might say, no, it's actually an act of integrity rather than a violation of integrity that I'm always going to uphold the utility principle even when I don't want to. Now, that's a fair point, and having said that, though, I'm not sure that's how we should read Williams' objection to begin with. He's not so much saying, aha, therefore utilitarianism is wrong. Instead, Williams is really just trying to challenge us to kind of think about what is ethics? What kind of principles are moral principles? Are they these very materialistic based things, or are these kind of things that you should just adhere to no matter what? And so I really think the lack of integrity as an objection, it's an extremely weak one. But the much more important point, and this is what you should be thinking about in your discussion responses, is it really challenges our intuitions to stop and think, well, what kind of thing is an ethical principle? What should it be like? And if we look at it from that view, I think there's some important insight there. However, the next two objections, extreme impartiality and negative responsibility, are going to be doing something much more specific and much more devastating. And you could think of it in three steps. These are important steps, might come up again on the exam important. So step one, what is the concept? Step two, why is the utilitarian committed to it? Step three, why is that a problem? That is, why shouldn't we be committed to it? So, start with the definition of extreme impartiality. There's a lot of examples, but they all have to do with There is no relevant difference between yourself and others. This extreme impartiality, the South American murder, the weapons job examples. But we can think of other ones. So here's an extreme impartiality case you might think of. Well, I'm coming home from work and the apartment building's on fire, and let's stipulate that I have time to clean out exactly one apartment, and I can choose between mine, where I have my one kid, or the neighbor's, which has three kids. And it seems like the utilitarian is committed to saying you have to choose the three strangers. And so, why? Because everyone's happiness is exactly equal. So you might also define extreme impartiality as the commitment that everyone's happiness is worth the exact same. It could lead to some extreme and cold calculations, for instance. Well, if you can save a life and all it costs you is your left arm, you should. If you have a choice between saving someone who contributes a lot to society to someone who doesn't, you should save the former, etc. But generally, extreme impartiality, everyone's happiness counts the exact same. We cannot make relevant distinctions between who's more important to us, what have you. That's what extreme impartiality is. Now, why is a utilitarian committed to it? Remember your utilitarian descriptors. The utilitarian is an objectivist consequentialist, and if you want to be an objectivist um, about consequences, that's what you have to say. As soon as you start saying my happiness is more important, you're a subjectivist. If you say my society or my culture's happiness is more important, you're a conventionalist. So the utilitarian is committed, loud and proud, to extreme impartiality. Now, why is it a problem? Well, we've been hinting at it, but the only real objection Williams seems to have is it's highly counterintuitive. I should care a lot more about my children than that of a stranger, etc., and even if the numbers don't work. So that's the general worry. And notice there's that talk about remote effects. Well, what's a remote effect? Go back to the example, I have to save three stranger kids over my own child. Now, a utilitarian might say, well, wait a minute. If I knowingly let my own child die, that's going to have some additional negative consequences, psychological damage, roughly speaking, giant frowny face for the rest of my life. But take that in two parts. First of all, does that matter to the utilitarian? Of course, all consequences matter to the utilitarian. But does it change their obligation? The answer is no. No matter how giant my frowny face is, it's not going to compensate the other two lives. And so the general position on remote effects is, yes, they matter, but not enough to actually change the utilitarian obligations. Roughly speaking, given extreme impartiality, if you have two kidneys and two lungs, you're not a utilitarian. So it's extreme. Let's do the same finally for negative responsibility. First of all, what is negative responsibility? The concept is that you are equally responsible for what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. Emphasis on choose. If you couldn't choose to do it or not do it, it's not an action. And so you don't want to define negative responsibility as you're responsible for what you do and what you don't do, because that's crazy. I didn't save Abraham Lincoln. That doesn't make me responsible for his death. So no. You are equally responsible for what you choose to do and choose not to do. Now, in kind of simplistic terms, the easiest way to think about negative responsibility is think about killing versus letting die. The utilitarian has to say those two are the same. Negative responsibility says those are the same. Well, I chose to let that person die, so I'm responsible equally for their death. Now, here's the trickier part. Why is the utilitarian committed to negative responsibility? Once more, it's a product of their descriptors. It's a product of absolutist consequentialism. The absolutist says only consequences matter to ethics. And so what are the consequences of killing? One person's dead. What are the consequences of letting die? One person's dead. So the consequences are the same. If we're absolutists about consequences, we must render the same moral evaluation, which means we have to treat those two as equal. And so, once more, Williams' criticism is that's highly counterintuitive. We want to make those kind of distinctions. We want to say there's a moral difference between killing and letting die, even if both are blameworthy. We don't usually think of those as equally blameworthy. So, to use an unfortunate, timely example, if I choose to uh, come to class and end up spreading the coronavirus, am I as responsible for those deaths as if I had intended to do so? Um, Seems like a utilitarian is committed to saying that, yes, if we only judge the action by its consequences, you killed 3 people. Um, but again, the criticism with Williams is those are highly counterintuitive. And we're going to lead into Singer. So it's really good to put Singer and Williams next to each other. So Williams says, the utilitarian is committed to extreme impartiality. Utilitarian is committed to negative responsibility. By the way, he's right about both those things. But then he says, and those are highly counterintuitive. We should reject negative responsibility and extreme impartiality, and thereby reject utilitarianism. On the other side of the fence, you can see Singer is saying, well, yes, the utilitarian is committed to extreme impartiality, is committed to negative responsibility, and yes, those are highly counterintuitive. But here's the move Singer makes. Singer's going to say, that's a problem with our intuitions. It's not a problem with ethics. It's a problem with how we think about ethics. And so he's going to use some very simple cases to show that we should be committed to these kind of things. And so really helpful to put Williams and Singer side to side. But for now, Williams' objections. Here's a concept. Utilitarian's committed to it. You shouldn't be. Therefore, you shouldn't be a utilitarian. So if you have anything to say about that, or examples, questions, etc., again, please post on the discussion threads on Blackboard. See you next time.